Alright, so this is going to be a lesson on drop 2 voicings for bass guitar. When we first start learning how to play chords on bass, we'll normally think in terms of root third seventh, or root seventh third. So when we take an E minor 7 chord, we'll think E, G, D, or E, D, G. And that sounds alright, but when we're trying to voice lead, it can lead to some problems because we're thinking of just one voicing per chord. And so like if you have a typical kind of like 2/5 E progression like you're jumping all up and down the neck and it doesn't sound very smooth. But if we're using voicings which aren't that typical root 7th third, something like this, you notice how the voices move from one to the other very linearly and very smoothly, and that's what we want to get. We want to play more like a guitar player or a piano player would when they're playing chords, because that's basically where that's the role that we're filling out. So the way that you do this is instead of thinking from the bottom up, you think from the top down. And so you create these chords by thinking in terms of what's called a melody note. And so let's think of it in the terms of F minor 7. So if we have an F minor 7th chord right here, which is the root 7th third version, and we want the top note to be a C, which is going to be the 5th of the chord. We'll then take that melody note and then spell the chord down from that degree of the chord. So what I mean is you take an F minor 7th chord, is take the 5th C, take the 3rd A flat, take the root F, take the flat 7 E flat, and then you have a closed position chord. It ends up to being a 7th chord, a minor 7th chord in third inversion. But you have a closed position chord which incorporates all the notes in that chord. Fortunately, it's not very playable. I'm having to use 2 hands and strum with my pinky. So what you do to make it playable on bass or guitar is you take the second note of the voicing, which in this case is the 3rd A flat, and then you drop it down an octave. So instead of C, A flat, F, E flat, we're going to have C, F, E flat, A flat, because the A flat dropped an octave. And then you have this voicing, which sounds a lot more open and less root-oriented than that one. So that's what it would be if you had the root in there. And so this is a very typical drop 2 voicing. And what's the cool thing about drop 2 voicings is you always have the root and the 5th paired on adjacent strings, and the 7th and the 3rd paired on adjacent strings. So what I mean by that is if we check out this voicing right here, we have the 5th and the root. They're on adjacent strings like that. And we have the flat 7, and we have the flat 3, and they're on adjacent strings. So and that plays a lot into their stable sort of sound and how they voice lead. If we check out another drop 2 voicing, which would be this one, we have the 3rd, we have the 7th, they're on adjacent strings, and then we have the 5th and the root, and they're on adjacent strings. So the way that you would practice this is then figure out all of the drop 2 voicings starting from the top melody note and then spelling the chord down. Possible, you'd have the melody note of the root, the 3rd, the 5th, and then the 7th of the chord. So for a minor 7 chord, the drop 2 voicings that are possible are going to be this. So once you're done with that, practicing that, then you go on to the next quality of chord, and that's a dominant 7th chord. So you're just going to start with the root and then practice up to the top, to the root an octave up. So for an F7 chord, the drop 2 voicings would be these. And then once you're done with that, go on to the major 7 chords. Now there's something interesting about the major 7 chords that you really need to keep in mind, and that is the drop 2 voicing where the root of a major 7 chord is in the melody voice. And let me just play that for you and see what you think. That sounds kind of weird. In certain contexts, it would sound pretty cool, actually. But when you're thinking in terms of a major 7 chord, which is supposed to be the most stable tonic-related function, this is not really the best sound for that. And the reason is because between the major 7th on the bottom and the root on top, it creates a minor 9 dissonance. And a minor 9 dissonance is the most dissonant intervallic dissonance. There's a lot of dissonance there. That you can have, and for it to have it in a major 7 chord, it doesn't really work. And so the ways that I've figured out to get around this are by just eliminating the 7th altogether and just having a first inversion triad. And if you want, you can also have the 7th, spell it root 7th 3rd, and have these 3-note voicings and play it like that. And it creates this nice little flat 2 dissonance, which is all right. If you want the melody note to be clear, probably not the best choice, but as a color, it's a good choice. So keeping going up, that would be the starting on the 3rd, that'd be on the 5th, and this also has the minor 2nd dissonance, but that's okay because the melody note is very clear. And then on the 7th, back to the root. The last one you have is a minor 7 flat 5, so it's kind of hard up there. So what you do is then you practice all of those, again starting from the root going to the top, and what we'll talk about in the next lesson is a concept called tension substitution, where we get in the sharp 5s and sharp 11s and flat 9s and all of those cool things. So stay tuned.